Your scanner throws up something like P334A or P0299 and just leaves you there. Most videos will tell you what that one code means, and stop. This one's different. By the time this ends, you're going to understand the structure behind every single DTC code, so the next time your car throws something you've never seen before, you don't need a forum post or a shop visit to make sense of it. You'll just be able to read it. Quick ask before we dive in. If you're into this kind of hands-on VW and Audi diagnostic breakdown, hit subscribe. I'm building out the whole fault code library here, one system at a time, and it helps a lot to have you along for it. Alright, let's get into it. Here's the thing about most code guides, mine included, up until now. They decode one specific code, and move on. Which is fine, until you get a code that isn't on the list. And this isn't just theory for me. Understanding this structure is exactly what let me realize that P334A wasn't necessarily an electrical failure at all. The codes category told me where to start looking, and the diagnostic logic did the rest. I'll link that full case study at the end. But first, let's build the foundation, because once you get this, you can look at any code, not just the ones I've covered here, and immediately know which system it belongs to, whether it's universal or VW and Audi specific, and roughly where in the car to start looking. Quick history lesson, because it actually matters here. Before 1996, every manufacturer had its own proprietary diagnostic system. A Ford code meant absolutely nothing on a VW. There was no universal way to read a fault without manufacturer-specific tools. Then OBD-II happened, Onboard Diagnostics 2, a US government-mandated standard that required every vehicle sold from 1996 onward to use a common connector, and a shared code structure, no matter the make. Now here's the part people get wrong. The genius of OBD-II wasn't that every code became identical across brands. It's that the format became identical, while still leaving room for manufacturers to define their own codes inside that format. That's why a generic boost sensor code looks exactly the same whether you're driving a VW or a Chevy, but a VW-specific actuator code like P334A doesn't exist on any other brand at all. Keep that distinction in mind. It's the foundation for everything else in this video. So let's actually open one up. Every OBD-II code follows the exact same 5-character pattern, a letter, a first digit, a second digit, and then a 2-character fault index. Let's use P0334 as our example, and break down each position, one at a time. Quick note before we dive in, almost everything I cover on this channel, turbo, boost, the EPC light, the wastegate, all of it falls under P codes, since those relate to the engine and drivetrain. So that first letter is going to be P more often than not for us. Let's go position by position. Position 1, the letter, tells you which system is affected. P is powertrain, engine and transmission, the vast majority of what you'll see. B is body, airbags, climate control, lighting, seats. C is chassis, ABS, traction control, steering, suspension. And U is network, CAN bus, module-to-module communication. Here's a genuinely useful tip. If you ever see a U code show up alongside a P code, that's often a clue the real root cause is a communication dropout between modules. Not a mechanical failure. Worth checking before you start throwing parts at it. Position 2, the first digit, and this is arguably the single most useful piece of information in the entire code. A 0 means it's a generic SAE code, standardized across every manufacturer. A Ford, a Toyota, and a VW all use the identical P0234 for an overboost condition. That logic is publicly documented and consistent everywhere. A 1 means manufacturer-specific, defined by VW and Audi themselves, not shared with other brands. This is exactly where codes like the charge pressure actuator fault live. These exist because VAG's engineering, like the electronically controlled wastegate actuator on the EA888, just doesn't have an exact equivalent on other platforms. 2 and 3 are also manufacturer-specific, used less often. 4 through 9 are additional generic and manufacturer splits, mostly for emissions and hybrid or EV systems. This single digit tells you where to even start looking for help. 0. Generic OBD-II forums and cross-brand resources will have good information. 1, 2, or 3. You need VAG-specific sources. General automotive forums often won't have anyone who's ever seen your code before. Position 3, the second digit, narrows things down to which part of the powertrain is actually involved. 0, 1, or 2 means fuel and air metering. 3 is ignition and misfire. 4 is emissions control. 5 is vehicle speed and idle control. 6 is computer and output circuits. 7 and 8 are transmission. And here's the shortcut I use constantly. Turbo and boost-related codes almost always fall in that 0 to 2 range, since boost pressure is fundamentally an air metering function. So if you see a code starting with 0, 1, or 2 in this position, there's a good chance you're looking at a fuel, air, or boost-related fault, before you've even read the description. Last 2 characters, the specific fault index. This pinpoints the exact component and failure type. Generic codes follow pretty consistent patterns here. 34 is usually a circuit or performance malfunction, 35 or 36 is a circuit range or performance issue, 37 is circuit low input, 38 is circuit high input. But VAG manufacturer-specific codes don't always follow that exact numeric convention. You'll also see letters, A through F, show up in this position on extended manufacturer codes, which is exactly why P334A ends in a letter instead of a number. VAG's fault index range runs beyond what 2 plain digits can cover. Once you've seen enough of these, readable subpatterns start to emerge, especially around actuator and sensor circuit faults, which commonly separate into circuit low, circuit high, and performance variants, similar in spirit to the generic structure we just covered. So here's how you actually put this to work. Next time your scanner throws a code you don't recognize, work through it in this order instead of jumping straight to a parts list. 1. Read the letter, confirm you're actually in the system you think you're in. 2. Check the first digit, generic or manufacturer specific, which decides where you search next. 3. Check the second digit, narrowing down the subsystem. 4. Only then look up the specific fault description, now armed with context instead of guessing blind. And 5. Look for sibling codes. If a related code with a different suffix shows up in the freeze frame history, that's often the clue that ties the whole fault together. Quick reference before we wrap up, these are the structure groups you'll run into most on a VW or Audi. P00XX through P02XX, fuel and air metering, which covers most of your turbo boost and charge pressure faults. P03XX, ignition and misfire. P04XX, emissions, EGR, EVAP, catalytic converter. P05XX, vehicle speed and idle control. P06XX, control module and circuit faults. P07XX through P08XX, transmission. Screenshot that one if you want it handy. A few quick ones before we close out. Does a higher code number mean a more serious problem? No, codes are organized by system and subsystem, not severity. A misfire code and a fuel trim code aren't ranked by how bad they are, you have to read the actual description and consider your symptoms. Why do 2 different scanners sometimes show different detail for the same fault? Generic OBD-II readers only show the standardized P0 level codes. Manufacturer-level tools like VCDS or OBD-11 reach the fuller VAG-specific code set, including extended fault details a basic reader simply can't get to. And can one physical part trigger multiple different codes? Yes, extremely common with actuators and sensors. A single failing wastegate actuator, for example, can trigger different fault indexes depending on whether it's failing at startup, under load, or intermittently. Which is part of why understanding the structure pays off so much more than memorizing single codes. So here's the one thing to take away from all of this: a DTC code isn't a random string. It's a structured address. It tells you the system, the code's origin, generic or manufacturer specific, and the subsystem, before you've even looked anything up. Next time your scanner throws a code you don't recognize, you can break it down piece by piece instead of guessing, and go straight to the right resources instead of searching blind. If you want to see this exact structure applied to a real fault, I've got the full P334A charge pressure actuator case study linked in the description. That's the one that started all of this. If this saved you a trip to the shop, or just made your next check engine light a little less annoying, do me a favor and hit subscribe. I'm putting out breakdowns like this one regularly for the fault code library, and it genuinely helps the channel when you're part of it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.